let me give you an idea very quickly on the overhead here of some differences between reading, speed reading, and what we now call subliminal photography. And subliminal photography, by the way, subliminal photography, the word subliminal simply means outside of the conscious perception, and of course photography means taking a picture, and that's exactly what we're dealing with in subliminal photography, taking a picture of information outside of the conscious perception. Let's start with reading though real quick. Reading, the National Education Association tells us, and we've been able to verify it with over 11,000 people testing out as well, we read at an average of 250 words per minute. Now what does that mean? There's approximately 300 to 350 words on the normal printed page. So we're reading at a little less than a page per minute. That's the average reading speed of an adult in our society. What's really astonishing is that we only comprehend 50% of what we read immediately after we read it, which is the best possible time for us to comprehend anything that we read. That's all we get from reading through one time. Now these statistics are all based upon reading something through one time, not studying it, going over it and over and over it again. We'll get into that in a second. Retention is even more startling because we lose 90% of that 50% we got originally within 48 hours. It's absolutely amazing to me that that's the vehicle for learning that we have in the world today. That's what we're taught to learn through that vehicle. And it's so inefficient, and it's stressful. There's a lot of problems with it. Let's go into speed reading very quickly. Speed reading, approximately 1,000 words a minute. It doesn't make really any difference. We just picked that figure out. If you're talking about 800 words a minute, 1,000 words a minute, 5,000 words a minute, or 10,000 words a minute, it's irrelevant. What speed reading is involving and reading is involving are two specific things that must be present. Number one, you must focus on the page. You must focus literally on every word as you read. When you speed read, you're focusing on some of the words because you don't have enough time in coming down the page, depending on how fast you're going, to focus on all of them. And the other thing that's prevalent in both reading and speed reading is subvocalization. You have to say the words to yourself. If you'll stop and think back to when we were taught to read, or your child or grandchild was taught to read, the teacher starts at one end of the room, and gosh, would you get up and little Johnny and read the first paragraph to the class out loud, and so Johnny gets his turn, and then Mary gets her turn, and on around the class we go, and everybody reads out loud to the class. Then somewhere along the line, the teacher says, now I'd like you all to read to yourselves. The only thing that really changes is that from that point on, we, rather than saying the words outwardly, say them inwardly. And it's called subvocalizing the words rather than vocalizing them. In doing that, it's very easy to see. I mean, it's visually easy to see. You can see people's lips move when they read. You can see their Adam's apple move when they read. They're actually saying the words as they read. That's part of reading. Well, what that does is it puts a definite physical limitation on how fast you will ever be able to read. Because the world's fastest talker, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, is a little over 600 words a minute. So there's no way you're going to read any faster than 600 and some words a minute. That's the fastest. And obviously no one really, but that person comes very close to that. The average reader is about 250 words a minute. And interestingly enough, that's the average talking speed as well. So there's a direct correlation there. Speed reading, just the very fact that you are now just subvocalizing some of the words. We're told to subvocalize the most important words on the page when we come down the page in speed reading. But comprehension goes up from going through the material one time. It jumps from 50% to 60%. Pretty substantial increase. Retention, considerably better. Rather than losing 90% of that 50% in 48 hours, you now are able to retain it pretty well for about a week. Then it drops off dramatically. But at least it's certainly much more efficient than reading. Now we get to subliminal photography. Subliminal photography starts at approximately 25,000 words per minute. At 25,000 words per minute, that's a page of print that's relatively large print. and dealing with the speed of 2 pages per second. At that speed, subliminal photographing begins and subvocalizing ceases and focusing on the page ceases. So there is no longer a sensation of reading involved. That's the difficult part for the conscious mind to grasp, because it doesn't know how to react to that. All it knows is how to react to saying the words, reading, if you will. So it's something new it has to get used to. It takes about 3 weeks of using it regularly, as it does with any new habit you're forming, to do that. Going through the material one time, what we have found is the average comprehension jumps to 77%. Considerably higher than reading and speed reading, and the only reason it's not 100% is because when you go through material at the pages of 2 pages a second, in the way books are designed today to read, with square corners, you're going to miss pages. It's difficult. You'll find that out very rapidly. Difficult to turn pages every second, so that you're seeing 2 pages each second as it goes by. And the average is that you'll miss 23% of the pages. That's okay. What we have found is if you didn't see it, you didn't get it. So consequently, your comprehension figure is an average of 77% for going through the material one time. What does it take to get it into the 90 percentiles? We have found you need to go through the material 3 times. If you'll photograph the book 3 times, you'll miss 23% of the pages every time as an average, but they won't be the same pages. And you'll have seen over 90% of the book after going through it 3 times, and you will score in the 90 percentiles on tests that you take. What does that mean from a time standpoint? Remember, we're talking about reading at less than 1 page per minute. We're talking about going through a 120-page book in 1 minute. A 360-page book in 3 minutes. Going through a 360-page book 3 times, less than 10 minutes. Less than the time it would take you to read 10 pages. What's even more startling is in this very beginning of this testing, the people involved, the researchers involved, told me that the retention factor was showing 100%, and it would continue to be 100% for life. Well, I'm from Nebraska originally, and that's pretty close to Missouri, and I really couldn't buy that right off the bat. That was a little beyond my scope. But we've been able to measure it now for 17 years, and it's still 100%. So I do believe that they were right. And the reasoning is that we had opened up a very specific direct channel through the brain that automatically can be utilized to trigger the information right back out through the same channel.